By the time the women reached the top floor, the city had already disappeared beneath them. That was part of the design. From the elevator, they stepped into silence, then marble, then soft amber light that made everything look expensive enough to forgive. The penthouse smelled faintly of cedar and cold champagne. Nothing personal sat in the room. No family photos, no books with folded corners, no signs of a life actually lived there. Only surfaces, glass, gold, control. On the black stone table near the entrance, a leather folder always waited. Inside was the contract. No photographs, no recordings, no questions about his private life, no assumptions about the future. Generous compensation would be transferred by morning. Every sentence was polished until it sounded less like exploitation and more like etiquette. He liked it that way. It allowed him to believe he was not taking anything. He was only arranging terms. Adrian Vale never raised his voice. He never needed to. Wealth had trained the world to lean toward him before he spoke. At charity dinners, people called him disciplined. In interviews, they called him self-made. Young founders quoted him. Older men envied how untouched he seemed by shame. But the truth of him lived here, high above the streets, where desire was measured, priced, and filed. He stood near the window as tonight's guest read the folder. She did not fidget, did not pretend to hesitate for effect, did not glance around the room with that familiar mix of awe and calculation. She simply read, page by page, as if she were reviewing a lease on an ordinary apartment. Adrian watched her over the rim of his glass. Most women revealed themselves in the first minute. Some tried to seem harder than they were. Some softened too quickly. Some looked offended until they saw the number at the end. This one gave him nothing. When she finished, she picked up the pen and signed. No trembling hand, no little smile, no performance. Then she closed the folder gently and looked up at him, not with fear, not with admiration, with curiosity. His jaw tightened without moving. "Is something wrong?" he asked. Her eyes moved once across the room, over the gold fixtures, the sealed windows, the perfect order of everything. "No," she said softly. "I was just wondering how long a person has to live like this before it stops feeling like freedom." For the first time in years, the room did not feel entirely his, and though Adrian would never have admitted it, something old and buried inside him shifted at the sound of her voice. He smiled anyway, because men like him always do when they feel the first crack. In the days that followed, Adrian did what he always did after a new arrangement began. He classified her. That was his private habit. Not on paper. Never that. But in the quiet chambers of his mind, every woman eventually became a type. Some were nervous enough to please. Some were clever enough to negotiate. Some mistook access for intimacy and began speaking too soon, too warmly, as if one evening in his orbit had turned them into something chosen. He understood those women. Their patterns were ordinary. Need always made itself visible, but Elara did not fit anywhere. She arrived on time, left on time, spoke only when silence had already done half the work. She accepted the gifts with the same expression she wore when handed a glass of water. Once he sent a bracelet so rare the jeweler himself delivered it in a velvet case. She turned it over in her fingers, studied the clasp, and placed it back in the box without insult and without gratitude. "It's beautiful," she said, "but it doesn't seem to belong to me." No accusation, no game in her tone. That unsettled him more than rejection would have. By the third meeting, Adrian noticed himself preparing for her, not outwardly. He would never allow that. But he changed the music, dismissed a bottle he normally preferred, asked the chef to keep dinner simple because she had once eaten only a few olives, bread, and tea, as if appetite itself were something she had learned to govern. He began watching for reaction and finding none. The penthouse had always worked like an instrument: light, glass, distance, all tuned to create imbalance. Most people entered and became slightly smaller. Their voices softened, their posture changed. They looked around as if the room had already judged them and found them temporary. Elara looked around as if she was studying a museum built by a lonely man. That thought came to him uninvited, and he resented it at once. One evening, rain drifted softly against the sealed windows. The city below blurred into bands of white and red. Adrian stood by the bar while she moved slowly through the living room, her fingertips grazing nothing, her eyes catching on every immaculate surface. "You don't like it," he said. She turned. Your home. Yes, it's impressive. That isn't the same answer. She held his gaze for a moment, then looked toward the dark glass, reflecting both of them back into the room. It feels carefully protected, she said, like something built after damage. He laughed once, low and controlled. You speak as if you know me. No, she said. I speak as if I know rooms. That should have been the end of it. A strange remark, nothing more. But after she left, Adrian remained standing in the same place, drink untouched, staring at his own reflection in the window. For the first time, the penthouse did not feel like a throne. It felt arranged, defensive, a beautiful structure erected around some old fracture he had spent years refusing to name. He slept badly that night, not because of desire. That would have been easier. It was the discomfort of being seen only in outline and still feeling exposed. By morning, he told himself it was irritation, a passing annoyance, nothing more. But when her message arrived 2 hours later, brief, polite, almost sterile, he read it 3 times before answering, and that was how the shift began. Not with seduction, with attention. By the second week, Adrian stopped pretending Elara was incidental. He still kept the same posture in public, the same measured tone, the same immaculate schedule that had made lesser men admire him and fear him in equal measure. But beneath that polished surface, a private disorder had begun. It showed up in small humiliations first. He started checking his phone between meetings. Then during meetings, he reread her short messages for tone, for temperature, for some hidden current he could not quite name. A delayed reply from her could sour an entire afternoon. A single detached sentence could keep him awake longer than any market risk ever had. He told himself it was curiosity. That lie lasted 3 days. Soon he was rearranging obligations without admitting why. A dinner moved, a call shortened, a board review delegated. He wanted evenings left open, just in case she agreed to come by. The same man who once made others wait, now felt the slow violence of anticipation. Hours stretched, silence acquired weight, and when she did arrive, she never rewarded the waiting. That was the cruelty of it. Elara remained composed, almost ceremonial in the way she moved through his penthouse. She never reached for him emotionally, never asked where this was going, never used need as leverage. She sat in his expensive rooms as if she were listening to a language only she could hear, and sometimes Adrian had the strange sensation that she was not inside his world at all, only observing the architecture of it before it collapsed. One night, he poured a drink and handed it to her. "You're very comfortable with distance," he said. She accepted the glass but did not drink. "So are you. That's different." "Is it?" He gave a quiet smile meant to end the exchange, but it landed nowhere. She had not challenged him. She had simply placed a mirror in front of a sentence he was used to using on other people. After she left, he walked the length of the penthouse twice, then 3 times. The city below glittered like a field of instruments. He could buy buildings, alter markets, change the direction of entire rooms with a glance, yet one woman's calm had begun to dismantle his inner balance with terrifying precision. Sleep thinned, appetite dulled. His temper, once hidden under perfect manners, started slipping through in clipped replies and sudden irritation. An analyst misspoke during a morning presentation, and Adrian cut him off so sharply the room went still. Later, alone, he realized he had not been angry at the analyst. He had been angry at absence. That was when the truth became impossible to ignore. He was no longer managing the arrangement. He was feeding it, and somewhere inside that hunger, the first iron bar of the cage slid into place. The damage became visible in places Adrian once considered untouchable. Numbers, first. A delayed acquisition, a careless signature on a deal he would normally have torn apart in 10 minutes. A private transfer made too quickly, then another, then a third, each one justified in the moment by the fog of urgency that now seemed to follow him everywhere. His advisors noticed the change before they named it. Meetings grew shorter. His patience thinned. Questions he once welcomed now sounded to him like intrusion. He began guarding his phone in the boardroom. That alone told the truth. Elara never demanded anything openly. That was what made the unraveling so complete. She did not push. She did not chase. She simply remained just distant enough for him to keep stepping forward. Every time he tried to secure the bond with money, access, gifts, promises, the emptiness returned larger than before. It was like pouring gold into a well with no bottom. One evening he asked, more sharply than intended, "What is it you actually want?" She looked at him for a long moment, almost gently. "Nothing from you," she said. The words struck deeper than insult ever could have. Adrian felt something cold move through him. For years he had built his life on one unspoken belief. Everyone wanted something. That was what made people manageable, predictable, buyable. But if she wanted nothing, then all his power had nowhere to land. In the weeks that followed, the cracks widened. A senior partner resigned after a brutal argument behind closed doors. A journalist published whispers of erratic behavior. Investors began asking for reassurance in tones so polished they almost sounded respectful. The empire still stood, but its symmetry was gone. Those who depended on Adrian's certainty could feel that something inside him had rotted loose. And through all of it, the penthouse remained immaculate. The gold fixtures still shone, the windows still looked down over the city like a private kingdom. But now the silence inside the rooms had changed. It no longer felt controlled, it felt vacant, like wealth had finally run out of ways to disguise loneliness. The last time Elara came, she stood near the window while dusk gathered over the skyline. Adrian watched her with the exhausted alertness of a man who had mistaken obsession for devotion and hunger for love. "You knew," he said. She turned slightly. Knew what? That this would happen. Her face did not harden. That would have made it easier. "I knew you were already living in a cage," she said. "I just never agreed to sit in it with you." Then she left. No scene, no triumph, no backward glance. Months later, when the worst of the financial collapse had already passed through the papers and into rumor, Adrian still lived in the penthouse. But now it had the stillness of a mausoleum. He moved through those beautiful rooms like a man serving a sentence no judge had needed to pronounce. At night he sometimes stood before the sealed glass and stared at his own reflection floating over the city lights. For the first time in his life, there was no one left to buy, no one left to impress, no one left to blame, only the shape of the prison he had built with appetite and the terrible knowledge that he had entered it willingly.